And we are back on the desk before the fourth game of the day is going to be Bifrost versus Dusty. How are you guys feeling about that one?
I actually think this game could be more competitive than we at first would think, just because I think Dusty showed signs of life when we saw them play. I don't think we saw them to their full potential. I do think they have a lot of good players. When you were talking to them on the interviews as well, scrim results had been better and they had high expectations for themselves. But at the same time, once again, I think there is a clear favorite in this game, which is Bifrost for obvious reasons with the caliber of players they're bringing into this matchup.
It is one to watch. We know Bifrost is coming in really hot. But what about Dusty? What can you do to adapt to the gameplay of Bifrost?
So I actually think Dusty came in with a pretty good plan. The last time they played the Caitlyn Morgana in the bot lane versus a Leona, I thought this was really clever. It's a pretty easy lane for Caitlyn to play. I just think they didn't take into consideration that a lot of the globals can really disrupt their plan. So I think they're coming with a more well-rounded sort of situation where they have thought over, hopefully, how they want to play the game, how they want to adapt into the meta. I feel like they had a good grasp on what to do and how to do it. It just felt like Viking kept on repeating over and over and over again in his interviews, like that gangplank, man.
I mean, we did just catch him in the moment, but he was just like gangplank.
That gangplank is like haunting his dreams.
So no Caitlyn though, and so far, Goldberg has been correct about this prediction. Jinx is losing every single matchup.
What can I say?
That's because it's not a B1 Jinx.
You didn't say that. You didn't say that.
Okay.
You gotta be specific on that one.
Yeah, you're right.
You gotta come back to haunt me in the beginning of the argument. You can't time on now. I'm just sitting here in the glory. But it's
Hey,
actually...
listen, X7 is still undefeated. Same for me.
Well, they haven't played.
They haven't played.
There's room
True.
for that. But I think it's very interesting to see that Bifrost on blue side is the one banning away the Diana, just because throughout the entire day today, we have actually seen that the Diana was the one that was first picked as a priority target for a
50%
lot of
win rate.
teams. Yeah. But there's still the AD carries open, right? So oh, are you guys getting the goggles ready? Are they there? Oh, I think that's hot.
Yeah, baby, there she is.
That's hot. That's hot.
That's the win for Jinx today. And your overreaction ruined.
We can still see the adaptation, and this is what I was talking about as well, because B1 Jinx, we have seen it been punished by the likes of X7. If you catch that backline dive, if you find ways to finally disrupt it, and it's going to be curious to see what Dusty now want to adapt with themselves. A hyper carry strategy was something we also saw X7 do, and I don't think it's wrong. You can even go with the Lulu for yourself here. Thresh is already off the tables, so you know that they're going to be a bit more on the off end with the Jinx instead, unless they want to completely just try to go for the 2v2 with an engaged support into that.
I think whichever hyper carry goes with the Lulu will have a very clear advantage. We saw it yesterday with Nata as well. I feel like Lulu is such an underrated champion right now, especially when you have picks like the Jinx and the Aphelios coming through. I feel like whichever of the two teams picks it in the bot lane will have the upper hand right there, but they will choose to go more with an aggressive approach towards the Rek'Sai. So I'm thinking, usually when you have a Rek'Sai, you want to play towards a solo lane, you want to be able to dive, you want to be able to make early game plays. And now my brain is thinking, what could possibly Buckland have in his pool that could play very, very aggressive in the mid lane? And I love the Lulu pick right here.
Yeah.
I think this is a recipe for success for the bot lane.
I think you can, I think Lulu is a pick. Another one could have been Braum here, because I think the Rek'Sai pick is quite telling. When you see B1 Jinx, you're like, immobile AD carry, Rek'Sai that can come in from awkward angles, try to get this gank down. So I'm definitely already expecting Dusty to focus on the bot side here. And I wonder, last time we saw Bifrost third pick the Corki here, just blind pick it, but it seems like this time around, they just want to save that for later. So we are heading into second ban phase, at least for Bifrost.
That's what it is.
Where they're going to be taking care of the jungler. And
Stop it.
Buckland, is that for you?
Buckland, please, stop that, man. Stop it. Stop teasing, man. Even though Rek'Sai Katarina is a pretty good combo, I'm just going to say.
Save it,
but blind picking Katarina into, into like no mid laner. But I love that. I love that Dusty is playing for the mid-jungle synergy. They're planning to take these two guys and actually run over the map. Now, what I'd like to see is a lot of security for the Aphelios down in the bot lane, because Thresh, like you rightfully mentioned, has been taken off the table, and Jinx Lulu is a very, very, very oppressive lane to play against. Now, what I'm thinking right now is that you can take that LeBlanc Rek'Sai and take it all the way to the bot side, but we have said
it's a super strong 2v2.
It is a super strong 2v2, but once you try to dive early to shut down the Lulu Jinx, defensive teleports can then come into play, which becomes a problem. So I'm expecting Dusty to play towards the top side of the map and just keep the bot lane just farming and staying safe.
And that's the thing happening now as well. You can see Bifrost, they're trying to take as many engage supports off the table as they can. And that is just because that if you suddenly get in a position in this lane where you get put behind, you're super volatile. This matchup can become super explosive just because of how squishy Jinx and Lulu is. Can you get to the mid game scot-free? Great, brilliant. You're super strong. It's going to be super difficult for the enemies. But if Dusty can shut you down in the early game, that's where you suddenly have some win conditions.
Actually, in the Prime League we saw yesterday, DK played LeBlanc. He was 17 kills, 2 deaths, if I'm not wrong.
PTSD kicking in.
Well, yeah. I watched my team get demolished by one guy who played LeBlanc, but his performance was insane. So if that champion does get rolling, it becomes so difficult to deal with because you're like, sure, you have shields and ults coming in from the Lulu, but if the Lulu is dead in the blink of an eye, she can't use any of that. And so far, I'm just seeing squishes all over the place in the top 3 picks from Bifrost.
This is going to be interesting. Shikari haven't died yet, obviously. He played on last time around and have an insane peel. I wonder if this time around he's still going to go for that approach or if he's going to take something more aggressive. They might lock in this Renekton, but honestly, I think having a frontliner with engage would have been a bit better just because you have a Lulu with no engage. You're relying on... It could be, you're not wrong, but picking Renekton into LeBlanc probably isn't the best matchup. Yeah. So what we're seeing here on the side of Bifrost is way to create space. Obviously, you still have a Bruiser frontline, especially if the Renekton gets accelerated, but there's no way of knowing that because you've blind picked him. So if Dusty gets a winning matchup now towards the top side, it's actually not a bad composition. Rakan is completely free. There's nothing to stop him in this because there's no CC support. So I definitely say Dusty, they have ways if they can snowball this early game, especially down in the bot side, to create favorable winning conditions for them.
I like the Dusty lineup. Yeah. I really do. You have so many ways you can play the game. Rakan is actually one of the supports that doesn't necessarily do too bad into Enchanters and hard shoving lanes, and you can create opportunity for your Rexa to come in, for your LeBlanc to come in. You want to play towards the Gwen. Maybe we see a TP Ignite Gwen where she has to win her lane level 1 and push the Renekton down. We could see Rexa LeBlanc going towards the top side. I feel like Dusty have a very explosive composition where that Rexa can go in every single lane and you have opportunities to go to every single lane. And when it comes to the 2v2, I feel like Dusty have won the lottery here because LeBlanc Rek'Sai is so much stronger than just the Viego and Victor.
Forwards, win lane, win game. That's the approach to this one.
Game, that is for. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I can't just confirm it. Okay.
Well, I was trying to do 7 before, and I was counting the 7. So.
Okay, yeah, okay, there we go.
Okay, there we go. It's completed, and it's now the champion select, and I'll kick it to the casters normally with no hype.
Thank you for sinking to our level, Arkarom. We're back, Viper and Jamada, here for game number 4 of the evening, and I'm hyped about these compositions, if nothing else, because there's a lot of exciting stuff going on here.
Thank you for the throw, Will. I appreciate you. Yeah, no, Dusty,
you're welcome.
In particular, it's a very almost like solo queue-esque comp. You don't really get to see these sort of like Rek'Sai picks with LeBlanc like too frequently, especially not like since maybe 2020, sort of the earliest. So I'm curious to see how Viking actually plays this one out. I was just looking up his Rek'Sai, history. Last year, not so great. Didn't pick up a single win. In 2020, though, went completely undefeated on Rek'Sai. So it's definitely a champion that he, likes to play from time to time. I think it was 4 games in 2020. That's all he really got on it. And only the 1 or 2 games in 2021. But opening up here into Bifrost with it. Definitely a curious strategy. Completely blind, but of course backed up by this LeBlanc. A lot of setup there. Rakan as well, a whole bunch of setup as well. So, you're expecting a lot of early action, mostly emanating from the Dusty jungler and from Bifrost. You've got these 2 really strong scaling elements in the Jinx and, of course, the Victor. And you've got a strong top jungle to play through if needs be. And I feel like you may see that if the Bifrost bottom side feel like they can actually survive through all of this CC setup from Dusty.
And whether they'll be able to do so in a winning position. There's Elif just going to chase Shikari away, but it's early days and he's not interested in getting in a scrap with Gwen at this point without minions being around. But we are onto the Rift, and as the devs were saying, this could well be a much closer matchup than some people consider. Yes, Bifrost won their first game pretty handily. Dusty lost their first game pretty handily. I think there were still very, very good points from Dusty's performance up against JDXL on Monday. But do you think that do you think these 2 teams are on a comparable level right now? from what you've seen so far?
I mean, I feel like Bifrost obviously had a very, very strong showing yesterday. I think for Dusty against JDXL, definitely had their moments. They were strong in certain parts, especially I feel like Venza on his Kaden yesterday had a fairly good performance for most of the game, but just wasn't really able to close out against the might of what ended up being JDXL come the end of the game. So yeah, I mean, I think, Dusty maybe could have walked away with a win yesterday had they played out certain situations better. It's kind of hard to say. But comparable right now in terms of performance, I'll say Bifrost definitely has the edge, but this Dusty lineup, I kind of have a little bit of faith for it. I definitely feel like it can make playoffs quite comfortably. I think when you're looking at obviously the expected top 4 of JDXL, Astrales, I've lost my X7, and then probably Bifrost, right? That's what I feel like most people are saying should probably end up being the top 4. I feel like Dusty probably do have themselves a spot in that 5th or 6th slot, assuming they can find a little bit of consistency and a strength to play towards. And hey, maybe some crazy early game drafts like these between the Rek'Sai and the Blanc can be that access.
We started to see a little bit of what they were talking about on desk with this Rakan being able to pretty freely jump in, get some poke, jump out, no problem, because Lulu isn't providing that same level of CC as a tank potentially would, someone like a Fresh. But in the mid lane, this LeBlanc is someone that we definitely need to keep our eyes out for. Backland with Viking in support. Fury's going to have to be very careful not to get caught out on a very, very immobile Victor.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the scary thing about playing, any immobile mage into the Blanc, right? Especially when you've got such a high damage early ganking jungler like Rek'Sai in the game. Any minor misstep can just, be immediate death. Like right here, for example, even if Viking had stayed around and then just tunneled over whilst that chain was, of course, channeling through, it's just flash, knock up, and Fury probably dies in the CC. Looking for a topside visit, maybe. I think a little bit over eager, over audacious, maybe. Fury drops off as well from the Rek'Sai, so no immediate true damage. And Shikari gets away with having to suffer from a gank from the early Rek'Sai.
And it's just going to give a lot of respect. Shikari, of course, this player who has returned. I know Hiprim was super excited to see them back on the Rift after a little bit of an absence, especially from Nordic and UK play, but someone who's always been very, very dependable, has been on some of the top rosters in the UK scene. Now, of course, Bifrost, with the NLC being all-consuming of Northern League of Legends, but definitely someone we're happy to see back. And this Bifrost roster as a whole definitely got talent across the map, but Dusty can say the same. Everyone on this team definitely wants to be able to perform one-on-one, and it will be a question for me, really, is Dusty able to make those cross-back plays, that macro performance? Because when you're up against a team like JDXL, it's much more difficult to have that authority to be questioned on your macro play, because you never really get to make the decisions. And in a game like this, you're slightly more capable of doing so, I think.
Yeah, I think so, and especially when you take in consideration that the top side from Dusty, right, the mid all the way through top, they've all been together before in the LFL too, so they've got experience playing together. So that's sort of like pre-built synergy, which can certainly help in the earlier stages in terms of like gelling together and ensuring that, like you called out, right, those sort of mid-game macro plays are a little more in tune. We didn't quite get to see that fully in action yesterday against GDXL, unfortunately, but against teams, slightly lower down as well. Oh my god, flashing engage. Yeah.
So he wants to flash away.
Audacious,
it was brave.
if you ask me. Definitely brave. Had the backup of Backland, though, and FGG, so you definitely understand the thought process. But C-Boy isn't even forced to flash. He's totally fine with that trade, and now Vikings ganks a little less bite in them without that flash, a little less threat if he doesn't have the complete setup. So honestly, I'd almost call that a win for Bifrost in a small regard in terms of the pressure that Viking might be able to put out in the next couple of minutes or so. However, they will turn this into a dragon, and no contest will be had on this one. It will be C-Boy taking up the Krugs instead of looking for this contest here, and definitely makes a lot of sense. Dusty, the stronger early game team from the mid jungle right now. Okay, shield comes in almost.
A little bit close.
Yeah.
Well, C-Boy actually looking to get the engage off, though. Going to go on to Venter, a decent amount of damage coming on through, but the slow is there. FGG needs to do a lot of work here. Or Venter might go down. First blood will be taken up by C-Boy, and now FGG is in trouble. Viking needs to give a way out. Will he be able to? No, he won't. As Fury moving forward, trying to get towards the land. Shark, another kill going over to Bifrost. And bad goes to worse for Dusty as they lose the they gain the objective, but they lose 3 kills.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, Dragon, but it's just this chase down from C-Boy. So adamant. The Glit Lance slow as well, definitely helping catch up to Venza. And unfortunately for FGG, Venza had Gravitum in hand, so it's a pretty easy lockup there on to FGG, and what almost feels like a bit of a solo kill coming out from Fury. Kind of just picking up that one final kill there as top side come back out with the replay. A little bit of trading going, but I don't expect too much action here, to be totally honest with you. I feel like Shikari, speaking about him on Monday, and the roster in general from Bifrost, I said, this is probably one of the most ideal roster setups you can have, where you've got, what is on paper a very, very strong duo bot lane, a very consistent mid laner, and then, a jungler that's willing to do anything. Any job that you give him, any champion, he will fulfill that role. And then obviously Shikari, a bit of a wall, right? If you give him these flanking sort of like team fighters like Kennen, for example, he will fill that role perfectly. He will always find that flank that ends up winning you the game. If you put him on things like Ornn, like we saw on that Monday, he also fills that role and actually, in some cases, just wins out the lanes outright when maybe he's not even asked to. So happy to see Shikari back. So far, definitely had a pretty solid performance.
Definitely has, and has been looking very solid in this lane as well. Venza stepping up a little bit aggressively with FGG there. Backlund stepping up very aggressively onto Fury to get a bit of poke down, but takes some on the return. And it's good to see Dusty across the board trying to get a little bit going in the laning phase. Losing out a few kills can be pretty sad, but Duel going to be losing half his health bar to Venza and FGG, although the Aphelios takes a decent chunk in return, and Odie and Duel might look to get something going here. The ultimate going to be blocked by FGG flashing forward and taking it square in the face. I don't know if Venza would have died there, but that's the kind of support play we love to see.
Yeah, you love FGG being selfless there. You never know, it's one of those things where you're just about maybe in lethal. I think it would have left Venza on about, blinking HP. But the issue is, what if Odie flashes in and follows up with another auto attack of his own? Too risky. So I feel like FGG does the right thing, blocks for his support anyway. And this bottom side for Dusty not going necessarily how they'd probably want. I always feel like Jinx, one-to-one with Aphelios, has a pretty decent time anyway, in most cases. Maybe not always in the lane, but definitely in the scope of the game. But so far with that Lulu matchup with the Rakan, even though we spoke about Rakan has free access to that CC, Viking's not been down here to necessarily abuse some of that. And Viking actually hasn't really had too much impact. I might be able to eat my words.
Viking might have some impact mid, though, with the ult. Gets the kill immediately off the back of the slanderous report from Jamada. First kill for the game of Dusty as well.
Yeah, first kill of the game, but the thing is, we're almost 10 minutes in, you're playing Rek'Sai, you want to have had a little more impact than this. Even 9 minutes in. I know it feels harsh to say, but when you're playing a champion like Rek'Sai, and when you've got all of this setup for the LeBlanc from the Rakan, you definitely want to have found more than one, kill participation 10 minutes in. Even in pro play, it's definitely something you want to have tried to have found at the very least, and it feels like Viking hasn't quite found that just yet, but first kill for him in the mid lane, still very positive for Dusty. We'll see if they can turn it into a little bit more. Fury still doesn't have flash, so he's still a very, very vulnerable target to a repeat gank. And because they realized, Bifrost, that Dusty were maybe trying to eye up a Herald off the back of that mid gank, they've actually rotated their bottom side up just in time. Dusty caught wind of it, had to retreat, and now this is going to be Bifrost Herald. Venza will trade out a couple of places on the bottom side, but I still feel like Bifrost won't be too fussed about this.
Bifrost grab themselves the Herald, move up towards this top side, and we'll look to get a shove in. You've got a Jinx, you've got a Renekton who's going to be leaving. You've got to imagine to move down towards that bot lane, and it looks like Odie could well get a decent chunk of gold for himself because he's got the Rift Herald in pocket, something that we don't necessarily always see, giving that Rift Herald to the marksman so as not to share the gold potentially with Viego. But Venza in the bot side is getting a lot of free time, a lot of economy going into his pocket, and that could be really, really big for Dusty.
Yeah, this is maybe more than Bifrost were hoping for in terms of giving over resources to Venza here. I would really like to see Duel step away, but I feel like he's been in tower range for too long now. And even if that tower goes down in like 10 seconds, he'll still get it. Venza, I mean, I think it's a worth that. I'm not going to complain about this one. Secures first tower, and it denies it away. Technically, that first tower gold bonus to Odie up in the top side, which is why Duel, I imagine, was actually staying, trying to race the Aphelios in the bottom side. Unfortunately, Shikari can't quite stop that one from dropping. So considering what Bifrost were investing, I suppose Dusty can walk away somewhat happy with it, but they still find themselves 1,500 gold down.
Which isn't the best position to be in, especially when you've got stuff like Rek'Sai, stuff like LeBlanc, where you want to be a little bit more proactive. As you said, LeBlanc isn't the kind of champion where it gets to 15 minutes and you're like, oh, well, this game's over. She still has a decent time going into mid and late game. It's just not the same. You want to be aggressive in these kind of matchups. And while Dusty, it wasn't from want of trying necessarily, there wasn't really an opportunity for Viking to get stuff going really obviously. And that has hurt the team moving forward. Bifrost, of course, taking what they can from these situations, but will probably not necessarily be the most happy. They're in a decent position, but also haven't been doing everything, especially in the macro sense, step perfectly.
Yeah, definitely not. And it's going to get tougher for Viking too, unfortunately, as Rek'Sai games typically do if you don't find a crazy amount of snowball. Still, however, since of course last year with the Prowler's Claw, can kind of just turn into a mini assassin, right? Can still find these one-off kind of picks, because that lethality item just spikes her damage so high.
Boy, looking for the stun, will be able to grab it. FGG going to be able to dive away, but the Dragon now will take it up by Bifrost, but you can see Viking wants to get a re-engage. Venza getting a lot of damage down, but won't find the re-engage from FGG, who has to run away, rooted up next to the wall. They will be able to skill the Dragon, but on the side, Shikari's coming in for the flank, but look at the back. Everling's doing so much damage, but just gets ripped through themselves. Odie, untouched, trying to get the damage down, is dancing around, excited as you like. As Dusty are going to be in for a treat here. It's not a rout just yet, but losing one more member would be bad. Backlund has actually moved back around the side, looking for a flank potentially, but decides to just leave it. Doesn't want to jump into Shikari, so it'll be a 2-for-1 exchange. But Bifrost once again lose out on the objective.
They lose out on the objective. It's about the only positive thing I could say for Dusty here is that they walk away with the Dragon. The issue is, if Bifrost continue to get stronger, I don't even think the Dragon stack's going to matter. I feel like Bifrost will just take control of the map. And it will just be a situation where there's just no soul that gets handed out. Aelith, you know, he deals a fair amount of damage, but a bit of a interesting flank to say the least. However, it does give the rest of Bifrost the opportunity to effectively just get a free reset and turn that into more kills. So, yeah, Dusty, pretty sad team fight, but walking away with the objective. It's definitely some kind of positive, but Bifrost still going to have a pretty massive advantage here for the next couple of minutes.
Which is not something that you want to give them as Dusty, because you don't want to be giving any kind of advantages at this stage of the game. Tower plates have just fallen off, and it's Bifrost with the gold lead. I wouldn't go as far as to call it comfortable just yet, but when you look at where these two team compositions are meant to come online, you've got to feel pretty happy, especially with the likes of Odie on the Jinx. We saw him play it on Monday. Had an exceptional, outstanding performance on that one, rivaling Kevo's performance on the same champion on the same day. But I just feel a little bit worried for Dusty, because while things don't feel that bad on the Rift right now, you've got to imagine that they're much more likely to get worse rather than get better.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, you know, you've got some scaling aspects, right? You've got the Gwen on the side lane. It can eventually become a bit of an issue, but it just feels like it's going to take so long. Gwen, 15 minutes in, still hasn't completed an item. I'm not sure, maybe she's sitting on some gold, but, you know, 116 CS at 15 minutes, I think still going to be at least, you know, a good couple of hundred gold away from that Riftmaker completion. Venza, obviously, Aphelios goes out saying loads of scaling there, and I feel like LeBlanc actually might have some value in this game in terms of a sort of a mid-game, very, very potent poke assassin, but it's going to be so tough. When you've got to deal with the Lulu in the game, all it takes is just being a little bit overzealous. Oh, that's a pretty nice flamethrower armor there from Venza. Deals out a lot of damage, but all it takes is just getting polymorphed without going back on the distortion once, and you will just die. So it's going to be a tough game for Dusty to play out. They are still trying to keep relevant in gold, and all credit to them. But the scaling aspect, I really just feel like it benefits Bifrost way, way too much here. So they've got to try and find something and give themselves some kind of leverage here. I still feel like it has to come through Buckland right now. And they try and make sure that Venza, albeit being 0-3, stays relevant in the resource department, because he's still technically item parry with Odie, despite being 3 deaths in.
And this is kind of a similar situation to me, it feels like, to what we saw on Monday, when it was Astralis going up against... my name's going to elude me while the mid tower goes down, but Astralis was so able to control the game just because it was Nuriki. Well, of course it was Nuriki, because Nuriki drafted stuff very, very early on, and it wasn't a case of, wow, Astralis are super winning the game all over the map.
They just had to sit there.
Yeah, they just had to sit there, and this is a smaller gap in that respect, but Bifrost have also got a larger lead because they've been a little bit more proactive than Astralis needed to be. So it feels like a good parallel with that game. We'll have to see if it plays out the same as Backlund almost gets the assassination on the door, but does get ruined up. And this is the problem, because you do just get broken down, gets taken down by Odie, who's now going to move forward, looking for another, looking for a reset. C-Boy will help them find it. Now Venter is going to have to run, dodges away from the zap with the flash, but now C-Boy is still moving. Fury is still moving. The depth is secured, and Odie in the mid lane is able to clear up minions, because Bifrost take another massive fight with no reply.
Said it about a minute ago. All it takes is one bit of CC, called out the polymorph. I think it was actually the Jinx trap, so we'll have to get a look on the replay. I think it was the polymorph into more CC. One or the other. Lock up from the Lulu of all things, actually, into the Jinx traps. And yeah, there you go. It just sets up for the rest of the fight to be absolutely disastrous for Dusty. And things just kind of get worse, you feel. The team fighting aspects of Bifrost's composition just outscale Dusty in so many ways. It's going to have to take, miracle team fighting from Venza and some great engages from FGG on their account to really find a solid way back into this one. And as for right now, I feel like contesting this dragon would be game suicide. Give this one over to Bifrost. You let them pick this dragon up. And you try and hope to scale, maybe try and make it 2.5-ish items on Venza. And then between Viking and Buckland, maybe you just try and play out a 2v2. I feel like you're still strong enough to play out a 2v2. Between Rek'Sai and LeBlanc, you can deal so much damage. You saw LeBlanc almost 100-0 duel before he popped that wild growth. A lot of damage can still be available to this LeBlanc, but it's about actually finding the key targets to make that happen. And I'm glad to see them immediately after this actually pairing up as a duo.
This is something that is to be noted, because if Backlund can get the one-shot onto Odie, then suddenly the team fight does look much, much better. However, A, Fury still exists, Shikari, C-Boy all still exist. B, Duel exists, so Odie's probably not getting caught out on their own. And C, that involves LeBlanc not immediately being one-shot by someone, which, it could happen. And we're going to get another charge in onto the inhibitor tower. It goes pretty low, but Dusty Eye able to secure that one before the base is broken open. Bifrost, 19 minutes into this game, in such a dominant position, and it's hard to see Dusty coming out of it. We've kind of laid out the ways that they can do so. But look at this exchange in the top side even. Gwen versus Renekton, and Shikari at this point is just able to run her down. Doesn't get the kill, but is in such a strong position. It's just going to teleport away because there's no CC.
All right, yeah, I guess that makes sense. I questioned it for a little bit, but then I didn't get a good look at the mini-map. Jewel, maybe not looking at the mini-map himself, goes down to the collapse of Dusty there.
That
kind of a free kill to hand over? Yeah, All right, well, bit of a strange run of play there. You do feel like it was going to be okay, but unfortunately Jewel walks in. Dusty now, a little bit of breathing room, but you just don't feel like it's going to be too much.
There's not... Yeah, it's built themselves a little bit, and it's shown that that can work. The problem being is they don't gain anything off the back of it. Maybe a little bit of breathing room, but even so, there was no pressure being created by Bifrost at that point, really. Baron isn't even on the map, it's just spawning up. Now the next dragon's 3 minutes away, so there wasn't really anything for Bifrost to do. They just needed to go for a little reset and now control some of these waves. And Dusty, yeah, they bought themselves a few seconds to get some farm in them, but they need to be doing that either on a bigger target or around a big objective. If they can do that again and then get a Baron off the back of it, or deny Dragon Soul off the back of it, then we're going to see something a little bit more notable.
Yeah, definitely. So, again, scaling aspects definitely there for Dusty. And because of those 2 early dragons, there's no threat of, this early soul, impending doomsday snowball from Bifrost. So Dusty do have a lot of time if they can hold off Bifrost's onslaught, because it definitely should be noted, Bifrost don't really have a great amount of engage of this team composition. That being said, actually, aside, okay, never mind. Maybe Jinx speed up from the Lulu is all that's needed. But you can see how strong OD is already on this Jinx. 2 items in tow, able to layer in a lot of damage into Venza. And for Dusty, it's just about sitting here and waiting, hoping you can hit those item spikes. For now, Venza actually goes back, finishes up a Bloodthirst start. Aelif, it's a nasty chunk out, but it shouldn't be too much more than that. And yeah, I think gotta just look for some kind of picks. I've been hoping that Barkland and the Viking will play together. C-Boy gonna get caught out, maybe.
Nice knock up. That almost looked like the perfect play, but now Viking has caught and has to flash away. Looking to get re-engaged though. Members of Bifrost are pretty low as Venza could be caught out on the side though. Here's Fury, there's one. Venza running for his life, stumbling away from the slow, but won't be able to escape from Victor's laser. It's 2 on the bounce for Bifrost as they're pushing forward, looking for a little bit of damage on the back, and too much for him to want to dive forward to try an assassination attempt. Bifrost take another fight.
Yeah, Bifrost take another fight. And it's Victor with the flank this time around. Fury's so used to flanking, regardless of what champion it is. And we'll do it on just about anything. Mops up the fight, and now going to be turned into a Baron startup here. Let's see, Odie.
Odie gets jumped on, but that's the problem, see? There's so much peel and so much CC that they just go down, and now Odie can move back onto the Baron. Yes, Viking's still alive, but it's not going to be allowed in the same postcode, and this should be an easy, easy take for Bifrost.
Easy take for Bifrost indeed. Viking not able to get anywhere near in range. This one, take down the Baron, and we'll get a replay of this fight. C-Boy, face checking. I mean, yeah, thank you, observers, for highlighting the fog here, because this is a really audacious check-in from C-Boy. Absolutely no need to really be on this side of the map, if you ask me, but it doesn't really matter. A lot of damage you can see. The scaling aspects for teamfighting is there, but then, you know, there's no follow-up off of the initial engage because they've blown everything already. There's no CC. And once Victor shows up on the side to clean up this team fight, it is all but a done deal for Bifrost. They happily walk away with this one. They've got the Dragon up to take. They've got the Baron buff for the next couple of minutes. And this should just be, at the very least, the breaking open of the Dusty base here.
I'm going to be looking towards this Dragon first. There'll be a second of the game for Bifrost. Just taking the first 2 have denied a soul to make things go from bad to worse for them realistically, but I don't know how much that's going to matter because Bifrost, better team scaling, so much gold in the lead, and with a Baron under their belts as well. As you said, base has got to be cracked at a minimum and could look for something more, because if they get a good fight in this siege, that could be curtains from the Icelandic representatives. And for Bifrost, a very, very dominant week 1. They're pushing in towards this inhibitor tower. Members of Dusty, Backland's not there yet, though. Elif looking to defend against Shikari. Viking moving through as well, but they lose that mid lane inhibitor, and Odie is there ripping through on the Jinx. Objectives will collapse so fast as Fury moves down towards this bot side. Gwen needs to be careful. Will be able to skip away, but now the re-engage coming on through. A bit of poke, but not very much, and Gwen is the one taking all the damage. The rocket comes through so close to taking down Gwen. The inhibitor will not be able to escape, though. It's too easy for Bifrost. They're going to move forward, putting down all the poke, chasing on to Viking. Odie is quick, but not quick enough. He's got to kill, has to flash forward, but will get excited, will get the reset, and is now looking for more. Is that kills? Is that objectives? Odie's looking towards the tower, but the engagement comes through. FGG looking to keep Odie up, and he's still just free-firing all over the fight. Fury grabs another kill. Gwen will fall to Viego. Backland chased out. One more rocket is enough, and just like that, Bifrost remain undefeated, and Dusty will not have a win going into week 2.
Yeah, won't have a win going into week 2, unfortunately. Pretty solid performance, honestly, from Bifrost all around. I've got to say, you know, props to Odie, especially once he was, you know, actually given the platform to carry here with that Jinx pickup. It was an absolutely stellar performance. And yeah, you know, talking about the Dusty draft, it's definitely, you know, a hard one to look at. You draft all of this early game setup. You have definitely options to abuse the scaling aspects. Of course, the Bifrost composition, but they just never really got the ball rolling, unfortunately, with the Rek'Sai pick. You draft something like Rek'Sai and you pick it so early on in the draft, you would expect there to be emphasis to make it work, but there just wasn't, and eventually they just got outscaled.
I'm sure there'll be questions asked of them in the coaching room, but there are also going to be questions asked of them after the break, as we're going to have interviews and desks. So don't go anywhere. We'll see you in a few minutes.